Good afternoon and welcome to the Environmental Claims Code webinar. Before we get started, let's take a moment for an acknowledgement of country.
Advertising Council Australia would like to begin by acknowledging and paying our respects to the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Bunurong Boonwurrung peoples of the Eastern Kulin, who are the traditional custodians of the land from which we gather today. Advertising Council Australia would also like to acknowledge their culture of storytelling through art, dance and music, and pay respect to the elders past, present and future on other lands throughout all communities who might be participating today.
So advertising and marketing operations represents 2 to 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions, rivaling that of the airlines. That's a rather large statistic when we think about the impact of our industry, but together, I truly believe that we can make a real difference. Good afternoon, I am Steph Ludis, the Victorian State Manager for the Ad Council, and the Ad Council is the peak industry body for Australia's leading agencies. Our purpose is to foster the long-term prosperity of our industry and to make advertising the most valued professional service in Australia. So as this is a member-only webinar, you should find your agency logo up on screen alongside your fellow members. But beyond codes and compliance, Ad Council also powers Ad School, Award School, brings IPA to life here in Australia through its courses, is the driving force behind Effie's Australia, Award Awards and Young Lions. We also do a lot of work within diversity and inclusion at RAP, through the Create Space initiative and our Reconciliation Action Plan for members. And as the industry body, we of course champion creativity. And this comes to life in a myriad of ways, one of which is the growth agenda. We also have our Creative Festival, This Way Up, and Work Behind the Work, which will land later this year, which showcases the work behind the work of Effie award-winning case studies. But for now, I will pass along to Megan to introduce herself and the AANA.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here. Thank you, Stephanie. So AANA, for those of you who have not come across us, we represent advertisers, so your clients, probably a very demanding clients. But we do also have advertising agency, creative agency members as well. And essentially, we help shape the standards for advertising. We recognise that advertising has a social licence to operate. So we work with everyone in the industry and government and the public to set standards that reflect the community standards so that we can continue to operate responsibly. And we also advocate to government. So we believe we're a very responsible industry. We're, a positive industry. We can make positive change, and we advocate to government about the benefits of advertising. And then we also connect the industry. So we do training like this, and we also have lots of events like Reset Conference for any of you who've been there. So that's the AANA. Next slide.
Well, today's webinar will take 3 key parts. So the first one is the state of play. The second is the most important and where we'll spend the majority of our times of exploring the new environmental claims codes. And then we'll wrap by stretching beyond the codes and talking about our impact. So before I pass to Megan to take us through 1 and 2, I'd like to say thank you for coming along today. It is amazing and important that we adhere to the standards that are out there. And this makes sure that our campaigns are not only honest and non-deceptive, but also make sure that we avoid legal risks for ourselves and for the brands that we represent. So over to you, Megan.
Thanks, Steph. So state of play, if we go to the next slide. When we did our new environmental claims code, we received some really great research from various bodies who are not associated with the industry at all. The Consumer Policy Research Centre does some great research, and they did some extensive research into what people think about green claims. And it was very insightful when we did this code review. And basically, a lot of people, when they see any claims about environmental benefits or sustainability, are worried they aren't true. And 50% of people say that it doesn't matter what sector it is, they just don't believe them. So next slide, please. So when people see green claims, that's one thing, they're quite skeptical. And then if they find out that those green claims are false or somehow misleading, that 47% of consumers say they would stop buying from the business. So that it has a long-lasting impact on that brand reputation. And 35% say that they will basically, talk that brand down to their friends and family. So it is quite a, quite a wide-ranging effect if you're found to be undertaking greenwashing. So I always think, really ask yourself, what is the point? If a client comes to you and they want to talk about making environmental claims, it would be great as a creative, you can give them that lens around brand and what is the point of this ad, and is it worthwhile taking that risk doing these environmental claims ads. Okay, so on to the environmental claims code. So this code is an updated version, which is why we're doing this session today, and it took effect on the 1st of March. So no doubt you will be asked, to create ads that promote sustainability and amazing, initiatives that your clients are undertaking. And you just need to know whether you're doing the right thing, and you, like Steph said, you don't want to get them in trouble. So what is an environmental claim? Basically, under the old code, it was very narrow, but what we do know is people see images, colors, sounds, and it all combines to create an impression that there's a product or industry or a business has a neutral or positive impact on the environment, a less harmful impact on the environment, or the product has specific benefits for the environment. So it's a very, very wide definition now. And next slide, thank you. So with the new code, rather than go through all the rules, I just want to tell you what the key takeouts are. So our code aligns with the law. So the Australian Consumer Law and the new ACCC guidelines on environmental claims are mirrored in our code and our guidelines. So when you're talking to your clients, a lot of the time they'll have in-house lawyers sign off your ad set. And once that's done, it should also comply with our code. So we haven't tried to do anything new or onerous onto industry. What you need to think about when you're creating an ad is, what's the overall impression from that ad and from any claims you make in the ad. So a lot of the clients you'll work for will be very expert and familiar with terms like climate neutral, climate active, carbon neutral, net zero, but research shows that consumers have really no idea what any of those terms mean. So the best thing to do is to go and ask someone in the target market, whether it's your family, friends, just say, like, if you heard this claim, what would you think that means? And if enough people think it means a certain thing, and that's not what you're trying to actually get across, think again about the ad and the messaging you're using, because it's the target market's impression of the ad, not whether an expert within the company, your client company, thinks it means something, but the target market, who are quite skeptical and confused about a lot of these terms, may think it means something else, and that's what needs to be truthful. And when it comes to terms like green, eco-friendly, planet safe, the days of using those terms are basically over. So to say that your product is sustainable is a massive claim, because that implies that your product really has no or a positive impact on the environment. And we know what's involved in making anything. It's very hard to be fully sustainable. So make claims specific. So if your client's doing something amazing, you can talk about that amazing project rather than saying that you're saving the planet or that you're suddenly green. You can talk about that, a specific benefit of the product. So I saw with Woolworths recently, they had their little collectibles, and they just said, and they had some green imagery, and they said that their collectibles are now recyclable through curbside recycling. And I'm like, well, it's true, it's specific, and they're not claiming to be doing anything other than that. So they're not claiming that their product's suddenly eco-friendly or sustainable, because obviously making those collectibles does have an impact. When it comes to disclaimers, qualifications, those should support, not contradict. So if you need to have additional information to make something true, it should be really close to the claim, not in a little on the back of the pack or in a QR code. So yeah, everything that needs the claim to be true needs to be visible. And if you're going to contradict that message, don't do it on a separate page. It's qualifications to support. So if you want to send people off for more information that supports the claim, that's fine. Don't send them off to find more information which completely contradicts what you've just said. The next one's about partial information. So when you give half the picture, you can create an impression in people's minds that is misleading or just basically not true. So try and give, and it is very tricky, and that's why people hire you because you're experts in communication. So try and give the full picture as much as possible so that you're getting it all. People don't necessarily like to go over to QR codes or other pages, and if they do that and they find out that the rest of the information is contradicting it, then the ad is really only half the picture and maybe misleading. And then the other thing is when clients come to you and they have a pet project or a minor project, really query whether it's worthwhile making an ad about that project if it's so minor as to not be of really any benefit, or if that benefit's not really genuine. So when just query, does an ad need to be made about a project that's really minor, because it can create an impression that that project is representative of the entire company. So if it is a minor project, it needs to be clear it's a minor project. And then lastly, but not leastly, future claims. Now, people used to make massive future claims like we'll be carbon neutral by 2030, we'll be sustainable by next year, all of our products are recyclable. And no one was really ever checking those. But now we have standards and we also have annual reports that need to have this information in there. So the future claims now need to be based on reasonable grounds, and they need to start first with an ESG policy that the whole company signed up to and is actually going to happen. And because most companies, most of your clients will have to talk about whether they're meeting these targets in their annual report. So there'll be a way for people to figure out whether or not these ads are true. So yeah, be very careful with future claims unless they really have a great plan on how to make it happen. Next slide, please. Okay, here is our first example. So I like this ad example because of the visuals. So you've got the leaf there with the plane in there, you've got the green forest and the beautiful river, and then you've got a plane flying over top, and the visuals fly the greenest as the logo. And then this is from their website. So basically, this was a Norwegian ad, which breached over there and would breach here. And basically, the reason this would breach is because to claim that you are the greenest creates an impression that you have, and further it says, we strive to serve more and more passengers every day in the most environmentally sustainable way. So it creates an impression that it has very little or no impact on the environment, basically saying that you're green. And unfortunately, when it comes to airlines, it's a really high emissions industry with basically currently no technology to reduce that impact or those emissions by more than 1%. So all those new fuels that are coming on board at the moment can only replace aviation fuel by up to 1%. So just the emissions from the fuel alone is massive, and they can't do anything about that at the moment with the current tech. So it's a high emissions industry, and really it's just not appropriate to make these sort of claims because you just can't be green at the moment with the current technology. So that's the issue here. So if you've got a client who's in one of those high emissions industries, terms like green, sustainable, probably never going to be appropriate. The next one, Steph. Okay, now this is mandatory disclosure. So for those who aren't aware, from the 1st of January this year, most major companies have to report on their climate material risks and opportunities, scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, and their management strategy. So like what's their future emissions targets, all those sort of things. So there's going to be a handy little place for complainants to go to complain to ad standards and the ACCC and ASIC, both of which fine companies a lot of money if they mislead. So when you're creating an ad, maybe it doesn't hurt to ask a client if they are part of this mandatory disclosure regime, and maybe have a little look at their annual report if they've already made those disclosures in the past, and just check as to whether what they're saying and what you're potentially saying align, because that's a nice little sort of fact check exercise. And this is what consumers will be doing and complainants will be doing to prove if an ad is misleading or not. Next slide, please, Steph. So here's an example of where an annual report was used to fact check an ad campaign. This was done in the UK. So again, UK ad breached over there, but I think it would breach here as well. It was done during the COP26 climate conference. So there were a lot of climate aware people there. So it was done with that in mind to show that HSBC was doing something about climate change. So they, in big writing, climate change doesn't do borders. And then in smaller writing, neither do rising sea levels. That's why HSBC is aiming to provide up to 1 trillion in financing investment globally to help clients transition to net zero. So that was a real, truthful project that was actually happening. So that was able to be substantiated. And then another one, we're planting 2 million trees, which will lock in 1.25 million tonnes of carbon over their lifetime. Again, true. And basically, the complaint was that when you looked at their annual report, they were actually still financing coal and gas to such an extent that this funding for renewable energy represented less than 2% of their funding compared to coal and gas. So the complaint was that this ad, and particularly with the target audience, saying that they were basically tackling climate change, created an impression that overall the whole bank was doing that and they were shifting to renewables and they weren't in coal and gas. So they felt that this was misleading because they were still funding coal and gas to a large extent, much larger than these investments. And they used their annual report to check that and to find it in breach. So that's just an example of what could happen here from now on. Thanks, Steph. So this is a recent example of ad standards, just to give you an Aussie one. So have a little look. It's hidden in the bottom left square there. Our clean gas keeps the lights on and factories, hospitals and shops open from Tokyo to Toowoomba. So it's true that their gas does keep lights on, that all of that's probably true. It's the complaint is about the term clean. So this was a Hancock prospecting ad, and they basically claimed that it was cleaner than coal. And the community panel found that it may be cleaner than coal, but it's not necessarily clean. So when you think of the term clean, you would think about, renewable energy, or, you would be comparing that to wind, solar, and other renewable energy that has really low emissions. So the word clean meant one thing, they meant cleaner, but they used the term clean, and that created an impression that there was basically little or no impact, and probably as good as renewable energy. So they found that misleading. Thanks, Steph. Here we go. And this is the Woolies ad I was talking about. So I really like this because you can see they've used green imagery. It's a Minecraft collectibles, and they've gone to the extent that they've made, it's really hard, just so you know, it's really hard to make something recyclable in Australia because every different council has different rules and they're always changing. So to have something that is able to be curbside recyclable is really tricky. So they've obviously got to that stage. I'm assuming it's true. they've got to that stage and they obviously want to talk about it. And all they've done is say that it's curbside recyclable. They're not saying that they're saving the planet. They're not saying that these products are sustainable, and they wouldn't be, because the cost of making them, there's an impact of just making these collectibles. So they're not trying to say that there isn't some impact of making these products. They're just letting you know that it's now recyclable. And they've used some green products around, some of the green imagery from Minecraft. So this is sort of, I feel like, the future, where you can just talk about factually in a way that's helpful to consumers. You can talk about things you're doing and why you're doing them, and you can even talk about the challenges. But basically, this is, I think, specific and fact-based. Thanks, Steph.
Brilliant. Well, this brings us across to section 3. Thank you, Megan. So as advertising professionals, our impact does stretch beyond the codes, as you can see. Sorry. So it starts at our desk with agency business emissions. It stretches across to the work that we make through production emissions, and even across to behavior change, where people actually see our work and enact the behaviors that we're asking of them. And as advertising professionals, we know our superpower sits in that third column, that ability to impact the world around us for the better. And I challenge everyone who's on the call today to have a bit of a think around how we can actually change the behaviors around us to showcase the world we want to see. So Megan took us through how we can make sustainability claims under the new code. What I wanted to touch on quickly now is when we aren't telling sustainable stories, or where we shouldn't, how we can actually embed some of these sustainable behaviors into the work that we make. And again, by no means are we trying to say that any of these messages should elevate above our key message, or even, be part of it. But these are some of the smaller things that we should consider as advertising professionals. So, for example, if our talent in our story is traveling from A to B, we classically put them in a car. Could we pop them on public transport? If our talent happens to be shopping in the story that we're telling, could we look at having them in a vintage store? Again, that slight little change to showcase a more sustainable way. If they happen to be throwing out rubbish, can we make sure that they are following best practice when it comes to recycling habits? Avoiding the use of single-use plastic. So if our talent is going to a cafe, could they pull a keep cup out of their bag instead? If our talent is cooking, could they be using energy-efficient appliances? If our talents are out to dinner, could the majority of the food on the table be vegetarian? Or if we are making sets and building houses for screen, can we have a look at the type of house that we're building? Is it reflective of the number of people we've scripted to live in there? So again, these are really small changes, but they are very reminiscent of the way that we approach safe driving. That it's not core to the story, but if somebody was driving in our ad, would make sure their hands are 10 and 2 and their seatbelts are on. In this instance, again, it's just those small changes that we can make in the stories that we tell to change the culture around us. So if you are keen to learn more about how to reduce your impact both within your agency, with the work that you make and beyond, I urge you to jump onto the Member Resource Hub. Here you'll find the 5-step action plan for Ad Net Zero, some training around net zero, as well as a free member guide around getting towards net zero in terms of business operations. And if you're there, we also have member preferred carbon consultants who can help you track your emissions within your agency. And right down the bottom, we just missed it, but if you're in the production space, I urge you to jump onto AdGreen. It is currently free in Australia, and it allows you to track your production emissions, make choices around how you'd like to produce your work in real time. So jump on there as well. If anyone on the call doesn't have a password to the Member Hub, please reach out. We can get you access. So that brings us to the end of the webinar. We are open for a Q&A. So if you do have questions, please pop them into the chat for both Megan and I. We might just give it a moment. Perfect. Well, I might actually kick off. So Megan, if if you were sitting in the shoes of the audience today, what would you like to see in future claims that we put out there in terms of sustainability?
Well, I don't know if anyone's seen, there's a Rio Tinto ad about gas and the need for gas. And I really like it because it talks about why gas is needed for the transition to renewable energy. And it talks about the fact that the only replacement to reduce copper, you need really hot, fast energy to heat whatever it is to make copper. And the only thing that can do that at the moment is either gas or nuclear. And so at the moment, that's not an option. We'd need a lot of copper to make solar panels and other products that are really essential for renewable energy. And so that's why we need coal for that particular purpose. And I think that's what people want to know. I think when people understand, they understand the challenges, and they just don't want those platitudes where they're saying, oh, we're saving the planet, one collectible at a time, or, and they know that they're very cynical now. So I think if you can wrap some hope and some, you acknowledge the challenges, but actually, show that you're doing something positive and genuine, and, and explain a bit of information is great.
And not to go to the dark side, but what does it look like when a brand or an agency breaches these codes?
So we've seen a lot of enforcement by ASIC, and so it's basically $1 million fines. So if you're financial companies, super banks, insurance companies, that's a target for ASIC at the moment. And so massive financial penalties, massive reputational damage. And then obviously with our code, you don't have fines, but you will potentially get on the ASIC or ACCC radar. And then sort of that's sort of the beginning of the end for you. So I definitely think you don't want to be found in breach of our code. We've worked very closely with the ACCC to make sure that we align. So if you're breaching our code, you might breach the consumer law or ASIC laws. So basically for us, reputational damage, a campaign that you have to take down, and then potentially worse if it also breaches other laws.
Thank you. We do have one question that's logged in. So the question is, I think, directed to me in terms of the AdGreen trial and asking when the results will be released. So we did hold an AdGreen trial at the back end of last year. We are currently compiling those, and we'll have results and some updates from AdGreen within the next couple of months out to the market. If there are no more questions, we might wrap for today. But as always, if you've got more to say or have any kind of follow-up questions, you know where to find us. Our address is hello@adcouncil.org.au. And thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy your afternoon.